Hey, what is going on guys? RZ Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a few pretty underrated or sleeper OP champions right now for patch 8.24b. So to start it off here is going to be a pick in the mid lane, and it's going to be Rumble Mid. Now, Rumble Mid over the past few patches has kind of been popping up a little bit in the higher elos, and it's a pick that works really well into a lot of the most picked mid laners. Champions like Yasuo, Zed, Galio, Aurelia, Kassadin, these melee champions, Rumble can just feast on them in the laning phase because he's going to be able to bully them out really easily in lane, and a lot of the time, these champions aren't going to, or the players aren't going to realize how much damage Rumble is going to do, and you're going to find yourself getting solo kills in lane in a lot of your games with this Rumble Mid just because he does a ton of damage early game. With picks like Galio slowly coming back into the meta as well, Echo being played a lot right now, there's just great matchups for this Rumble mid lane, and in a lot of his matchups as well, he is going to be able to get early priority in the laning phase. He's got some of the best shove for any mid lane champion in the game, so you're always going to be able to roam over first, help your jungler with Crab in the early game. Once you do at level 6, you can shove in, look for roams with your ultimate, so I overall think that Rumble is a very underrated pick in the mid lane right now for the current meta. And then one more mid lane pick for this video is going to be the Galio mid. So Galio right now over in Korea is actually seeing a lot of play in this patch, but in NA and EU, it hasn't really caught on a lot so far in 8.24b. Galio mid right now in NA and EU only has around like a 4 or 5% pick rate, so it's still pretty low, and I think that it should rise in the coming patches here because Galio mid right now is overall just one of the most consistent picks for this patch. So the reason to why Galio's kind of come back into the meta are because of the buffs he got a few patches ago, and also the introduction to the new Shield Bash rune. The buffs he got a few patches ago were to his Q, to where the mana cost ended up getting decreased and the damage got increased, so that's super good for Galio. This also means that he doesn't actually have to go Rod of Ages anymore as his rush item. A lot of people now are building Proto Belt as the first item on Galio and then into a Morello, and that spike is just super good on Galio. The fact you don't have to go Rod now and you don't have to go for the scaling build helps him out a lot in the early to mid game. The champion just overall has pretty much everything you'd want for a mid lane champion. He's got pretty good wave clear, he's got good crowd control, he's got good roaming ability once he hits level 6, he's got insanely good team fights, so if you are looking for a good carry mid lane pick for this patch, then I would be picking up Galio. So if we head up to the top lane for the next pick, it's going to be Olaf top lane with Conquer. This Olaf top lane right now is doing super good into a lot of the meta top lane picks. Right now you got Urgot, Darius, Aatrox, Aurelia being played a lot in the top lane, and Olaf is one of the few champions that can actually beat out these picks in the early game. Most champions struggle a lot against Darius, against Aatrox, and against Urgot in the early game, but with the Olaf top lane, he's got one of the strongest early games for any top lane champion. Because of his Q spam, because of the Conquer, you can just do a ton of damage at level 1 and at level 2, and because the early game is pretty important right now, Olaf top lane is a pretty strong pick for this meta. With the introduction of turret plating as well, it does mean that Olaf has the ability to snowball even harder in the early levels. He's going to be able to bully a lot of top laners out in the early game. He's going to be able to take the Demolish, get a lot of gold from the turret plating, and just accelerate his build into a very strong early to mid game spike. So if we move into the jungle now, Ivern did get indirectly buffed for 8.24b. He ended up getting buffed because of the Ardent Sensor buffs and as well as the Redemption buffs in this patch, and Ivern's been a pick over the past few patches that has just slowly been getting better, with other junglers getting nerfed. Like in this patch, Tiamat got nerfed, so junglers that would run Tiamat in previous patches do get weaker in this patch. Ivern got some direct buffs a few patches ago as well. I'm pretty sure his E ended up getting a buff, so I think that right now, especially for the higher elos, Ivern is actually a pretty underrated pick for 8.24b. Ivern's overall just a very strong pick against a lot of the meta junglers. Right now you've got Lee Sin, Kha'Zix, Camille, Xin Zhao, Kayn all being played a ton in this patch, and Ivern in the early game can do a very good job at shutting those champions down and not allowing them to snowball. And then in the mid to late game, because of the utility Ivern does provide, if you got a Kha'Zix diving onto your AD carry, you throw down the Redemption, you throw down the Ivern shield, you've got Athenes as well, and Ivern just makes it very hard for these dive champions, for these damage champions to really succeed at all in the mid to late game. And then one more pick in the jungle is going to be Aftershock Rek'Sai. So I think that right now Aftershock Rek'Sai is very underrated because once you do end up getting Red Smite on Rek'Sai, and if you proc the Aftershock in a duel, you're going to win that duel a lot of the time in the early game. With the Aftershock, it does allow Rek'Sai to just play more aggressive, look for more duels in the early game. Once you do at level 6 with Rek'Sai, if you proc the Aftershock and you got the Red Smite, you're pretty much going to win the duel every single time. And because of the Aftershock, it also allows her to play a lot more aggressive, and it allows her to look for tower dives in the early game. Because of the recent tower changes in the preseason and them dealing more damage, a lot of champions can't tower dive super effectively now, but on your Aftershock junglers, it does allow you to tank more tower shots, so you can play more aggressive. If your laner is playing well and they're getting the enemy chunk low under tower, then don't be afraid to tower dive on Aftershock Rek'Sai because it's a great way to just snowball your lanes out of control. The Aftershock also allows you to just be more useful, be more tanky in mid to late game team fights. Rek'Sai isn't a champion known for her team fighting, and her team fighting definitely isn't the strongest suit to her kit, so by taking the Aftershock, it just allows you to sow more damage and be more useful for your team if it does reach later on. So heading down to the bot lane now, the first pick here is going to be Cassiopeia bot lane. Now Cassiopeia bot, top, and mid are all doing super well in this patch, but Cassiopeia bot lane is one that is very underrated, and with the Q max on Cassiopeia, if you can land these consistently in the laning phase, you're going to be able to bully out the enemy bot lane really well. And if you pair Cassiopeia bot lane up with another aggressive support, then you can really just take over games super well with her in this patch. So right now, if you're just looking for some freelo in this patch, then pair Cassiopeia bot lane up with someone like a Thresh, a Pyke, a Leona, a Morgana especially. If you pair her up with a Morgana and she hits one bind in the laning phase, then the enemy just dies straight up, because if you have a CC support, it allows you to guarantee you hit your Q on the opponent, you follow up with a ton of damage from your E, and the all-in in a Cassiopeia lane is just really, really strong. And then just to note there for the build on Cassiopeia bot lane, you're not going for a rod, you're not going for a tier, you're not building any of these mana items on Cassiopeia bot. Even on Cassiopeia top and mid as well right now, the Luden's Rush is just become a lot more popular. It gives Cassiopeia a much better one item spike. It allows her to be a lot more successful inside of this early to mid game focus meta. And then after that, you go for stuff like your Rylai's, your Leandries. Those are pretty core on Cassiopeia, but don't be going for tier, don't be going for rod in this patch. Just go for that Luden's and you are going to find a lot more success with that. And then 180 carry pick that's been slowly creeping up over the past few patches is Ashe. Now, originally I thought Ashe got buffed in this patch, but it turns out the buffs actually didn't go through for her, but she ended up getting buffed back in 821. She's also just a pretty underrated pick right now with a lot of the meta supports. With your Ashe, you do provide yourself with a very strong level 6 all-in, and because a lot of these really good level 6 all-in supports are being played as well, it just synergizes, or they just synergize very well with Ashe, and you can really just take over lanes once you do hit level 6 and just get a really good snowball going down in the bot lane. And then lastly, to round out the video, one support pick for this patch that's pretty underrated right now is Sona. So Sona with the heal shield buffs in this patch is doing a lot better with the buffs to Ardent, Redemption, and then also with Mikael's. She's seeing a lot more success in this patch. I do think right now that Mikael's is a very underrated item on a lot of these heal shield supports. The fact that it does now give you 20% bonus on your heal and shields, and the fact that it's just a great counter item to a lot of the meta supports, I would definitely recommend picking it up on someone like Sona as your third or fourth item, because it just greatly decreases the effectiveness of a pick like a Leona, a Thresh, or a Pyke in the mid to late game. If you are running into a melee bot laner as well, I would recommend considering Kleptomancy on Sona. Klepto's actually her highest win percent rune in this patch right now. Aerie is still a very consistent rune though, so in most of your matchups, you still do want to run that. But if you're going into someone like a Thresh, a Pyke, a Leona, then I would recommend running Kleptomancy, because you are going to find yourself generating a lot of gold and a lot of resources from it in the early game. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. Those are 8 picks for this patch right now that are very underrated, and they're champions that you can have a lot of success on and climb with for 824B. So if you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.